Before the Roman Empire and even before the Republic, there were 7 kings of Rome. And here is a rundown of all of them. The first king of Rome was of course Romulus. After battling it out with his twin brother Remus, he founded the city in 753 BC. He opened the city to refugees, outcasts, and criminals, which was fine for a while until they realised it was a bit of a sausage fest. They desperately needed some women, so they eventually ended up kidnapping some from the Sabines, but that is a whole other story. He also created the Senate, which began as an advisory board to the king, but it was retained throughout Roman history. His rule lasted for 37 years until his mysterious death in 716 BC. Now, it was claimed that he was whisked away to heaven in a whirlwind, but Roman politics was a dangerous game, and I think it's far more likely that he was assassinated by a rival or an enemy. After his death, the Senate appointed a new king, this guy who was a Sabine man called Numa Pompilius. And he was good, he was a wise man, and he was deeply religious. And he instigated major religious reform. During his reign, the Vestal Virgins were introduced to the city. He established new priesthoods, and he even created cults. He honoured minor gods, including altering the calendar to add the month of January to pay tribute to the god Janus. And he passed away of old age after a 42-year reign. King number 3 was Tullus Hostilius, and his name gives us an indication as to what he might have been like. He believed that his predecessor's peaceful approach to rule showed weakness, and he responded with expansion. He conquered neighbouring peoples from Alba Longa and Veii as part of Rome's first military conquests. How he died is unclear, but one story tells us that Jupiter struck him with a lightning bolt as punishment for not being pious enough. Next up was Ancius Marcius, who was the son-in-law of Tullus Hostilius and the grandson of Numa Pompilius. After the previous period of conflict, he pacified local Latin tribes and absorbed them into Rome. He prioritized the city's defenses and dug ditches around the city for protection. At the time of his death, his children were too young to succeed him, so a regent was appointed in their place. Spoiler alert, he did not stay regent for long because this is Lucius Tarquinius Priscus, and he was the 5th king of Rome. Like many Romans, he was an immigrant. He was an Etruscan, but his father also came from Corinth in Greece. So he conquered the remaining Sabine tribes, and he used the war booty to go on a massive building project in Rome. He built the Circus Maximus, but perhaps his best achievement is the Cloaca Maxima, which is the city's sewer system. Unfortunately for him, the little boys who he was supposed to be acting as regent for came back from exile, where he put them, and assassinated him. Whilst the Senate were arresting the assassins, a man called Servius Tullius seized the throne. His name is really interesting because it suggests that someone in his family's history had servile origins, and perhaps they were a freedman. His rule had an impact on the archaeology of Rome because he built the Servian walls that we can still see today. Bloody Roman politics got him in the end, and he too was assassinated. This time by his brother-in-law, who was called Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, better known as Tarquin the Proud. Straight off the bat, he was not a nice guy, and he refused his brother-in-law a funeral. He soon gained a reputation as a brutal tyrant by doing things like executing senators and waging war on local people. But why was he the last king of Rome? Well, it's to do with a tragic story involving his son Sextus and his niece Lucretia. Lucretia was married to the king's nephew, and she was the epitome of the perfect Roman wife. Now, Sextus raped his cousin's wife, causing her so much distress and shame that she killed herself. And she did so in front of her relatives, one of which was a man called Lucius Junius Brutus. Together with Lucretia's widow, Brutus was able to depose the king, and in 509 BC, the Roman Republic was born, with the pair acting as the first consuls.